Hello, I'm Katie Johnson, NAR's Chief Legal Officer and Chief Member Experience Officer, and I'm here to share a brief update related to NAR's settlement and our recent discussions with the Department of Justice. Let's start with a brief recap of the settlement, which would resolve claims brought on behalf of home sellers related to broker commissions if given final approval. The court granted preliminary approval on April 24th, and a hearing for final approval is scheduled for November 26th. Since the beginning of this litigation, NAR had three goals. First, secure a release of liability for as many members, associations, and MLSs as possible. Also, protect the choices consumers have regarding real estate services and compensation, and continue to make homeownership accessible for all Americans. With those goals in mind, we believe that this settlement represents the best possible outcome. Now, the next milestone on the horizon is the implementation of the practice changes following the settlement agreement on August 17th. Starting on that date, cooperative compensation, or the ability of listing agents to compensate buyer agents, is prohibited on an MLS, but it is preserved as an option off MLS through negotiation between consumers and real estate professionals. Compensation remains fully negotiable. Now, this is a very important aspect to note. Despite what others may be saying, giving sellers the choice to offer buyer broker compensation at the outset of marketing their home is an important choice to preserve, as it benefits both buyers and sellers alike. For buyers, it promotes access to representation throughout the home buying process, which helps more people achieve the dream of home ownership on terms that work best for them. For sellers, it helps broaden the pool of prospective buyers by lowering the barriers to entry for those who may not be able to afford to pay a commission out of pocket. Here, we are talking about lower and middle income buyers who may struggle to save enough for a down payment. Offers of compensation help make homeownership and the benefits of professional representation more accessible to buyers, including first-time home buyers. They increase home ownership opportunities for historically underserved groups, and it benefits sellers by expanding the potential buyer pool. Now, the type of compensation available for buyer brokers will continue to take multiple forms, including fixed fee commissions paid directly by consumers, concessions from sellers, or a portion of the listing broker's compensation. The bottom line is that under this settlement, buyers and sellers have choice when it comes to choosing and compensating a real estate professional. And buyers and sellers each have a meaningful opportunity to negotiate and agree to whatever arrangement works best for them. Now, also beginning August 17th, agents working with a buyer must enter into a written agreement before touring a home as part of the settlement. NAR has long encouraged members to use written buyer agreements because they promote a transparent relationship between an agent and a consumer. In fact, several states have already passed laws requiring these agreements. Under the settlement agreement, the new or revised forms must specify and disclose the amount or rate of compensation the agent and buyer have agreed to. They must clearly define how the agent will be compensated, and this must be objectively ascertainable. It cannot be open-ended. These agreements must also include a statement that the agent may not receive compensation from any source that exceeds what has been agreed to by the buyer. And they must conspicuously disclose the broker commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. We encourage all members to evaluate your forms, new or revised forms, with an eye for clarity and with an emphasis on consumer choice. This is key. Please also prepare and educate real estate professionals and consumers about the revised forms. Now, similarly, when discussing written buyer agreements, it's important to emphasize that these agreements are negotiable and provide optionality for consumers, and to make sure consumers understand the requirement for an agreement before an in-person or virtual tour. The settlement empowers buyers and brokers to negotiate and mutually agree to these services and compensation that works for them. This means that the real estate professional is working with the consumers to make sure they fully understand their options while continuing to seek compensation for their services. Now, to be clear, NAR strongly opposes any attempts to circumvent the settlement. The practice changes should be implemented fully and in good faith in the service of promoting consumer empowerment, consumer choice, and healthy competition. NAR policy does not dictate terms of buyer agreements, but we have published informational resources, including the Written Buyer Agreements 101. Please check that out. That contains guidance on the contents of the agreements and what they must include. So you can find that resource and other resources at facts.realtor. Now I want to provide some tips on communicating these industry changes to consumers. For many people, buying and selling a home is the biggest financial transaction they will ever make. This moment is an opportunity for you to demonstrate your value as realtors and to show consumers why realtors are best in class when it comes to carrying out all aspects of a real estate transaction. Please always communicate your value. We know the value realtors bring to the table, and realtors should continue to clearly articulate that value to consumers. When talking with consumers, focus on what matters most to them. That can include reducing stress in a highly complicated and high-stakes transaction, serving as their trusted advisor and demystifying the home buying or selling process for them, and using your extensive experience to navigate difficult negotiations, write the best offer possible, set the right price for a listing, and help consumers avoid common mistakes. Also, use clear, consumer-friendly language when discussing changes to these MLS policies, including when you explain what an MLS is and what it means for listing brokers to compensate buyer brokers, as many home buyers and sellers may be completely unfamiliar with these industry practices. One last reminder, continue visiting facts.realtor for these helpful settlement resources and further details. NAR is here to support you through this transaction, and we will continue to share guidance throughout the process. Now, I'm going to wrap up this update with 2 items related to the Department of Justice. The first issue relates to the 2020 settlement that NAR reached with the DOJ to end their investigation into certain NAR policies. That included their investigation into the cooperative compensation rule and the clear cooperation policy. Now, to be clear, that dispute about the 2020 settlement agreement is entirely separate from NAR's March 15th settlement agreement. Now, despite our compliance with that 2020 agreement with the DOJ reopened its investigation without any justification 8 months later, directly violating our agreement. And as a result, NAR sued to hold the DOJ accountable to its agreement. Otherwise, the DOJ's behavior would set a dangerous precedent. Now, it has been a complex path since then. District Court ruled that the DOJ was required to abide by the original agreement. But following a DOJ appeal, that ruling was overturned in a split decision. As we shared with you in May, NAR filed a petition for rehearing en banc before the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, seeking to hold the DOJ to the terms of that contract with NAR. The petition is fully briefed, and we are waiting for a decision from the court. Now, I want to emphasize again that that appeal with the DOJ action does not impact the March 15th settlement agreement. That agreement is moving forward towards a final approval hearing on November 26th. Now, the second item regarding the DOJ is that the members of the NAR leadership team, including President Sears, recently met with the Department of Justice Antitrust Division to discuss the issues and that the DOJ is reviewing in the real estate industry. Now, we are pleased that from the DOJ side, the meeting was led by U.S. Assistant Attorney General Jonathan Kanter, the head of the Antitrust Division. And he's the top decision maker and leader on antitrust policy at the division. We were also happy to have alongside us Gary Acosta, CEO of the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. Gary's a strong real estate policy advocate. Now, this meeting was a big step in our process to have meaningful leader-to-leader dialogue with the DOJ about the issues that matter to realtors. While there's much work to be done, the meeting was productive as we try to find common ground on topics that define how we do business and support the dream of homeownership in America. We plan to have future conversations with the DOJ on topics such as the value realtors bring to real estate transactions, the critical importance of competition in our industry, of offers of compensation, listing availability, consumer choice, and promoting access to homeownership for all people. Now, as part of these conversations, we'll continue to ensure that the DOJ understands how their positions impact underserved groups, and NAR is committed to making homeownership accessible to all Americans. We also want our members to be aware that the DOJ raised concerns regarding industry participants using potential avenues to circumvent the coming practice changes. Let me reiterate that NAR does not condone any attempt to circumvent the settlement. Also, please note that while conversations with the DOJ are ongoing, it does not prevent additional DOJ action. So it is possible that the DOJ may continue to make inquiries into industry practices. Please reach out to the NAR legal team for support requests or questions regarding the settlement practice changes or related to the Department of Justice. Now, finally, I want to share an important reminder for everyone here. This legal action does not change the fundamental ethical duties that realtors owe their clients. Realtors are always required to protect and promote the interests of their clients, treat all parties in a transaction in an honest manner. Please continue to use your skill, care, and diligence to protect your clients' interests. This is what sets you apart as members of the National Association of Realtors, and we should continue to carry these values forward in your work. Thank you.